John Barr, was born in Omaha and grew up in Lyle, Illinois, right out here to our west. A graduate of Harvard College and Harvard Business School, he served for 5 years as a naval officer on destroyers and went to Vietnam 3 times. In a Wall Street career that spanned 30 years, he was a managing director at Morgan Stanley, founded 3 startups, and played a significant role in the restructuring of the gas and electric utility industries. In the same period, he also published 8 collections of poetry and served for many years on the boards of Bennington College and 3 arts organizations. He taught in the graduate writing program at Sarah Lawrence College and recently retired after 10 years as the inaugural president of the Chicago-based Poetry Foundation publisher of Poetry Magazine here in Chicago. John and his wife, Penny, who's with us tonight, Penny, say hi. There she is, were classmates, John says, but not sweethearts, at Lyle Community High School. Their 2 sons and their daughter live in Los Angeles and Greenwich, Connecticut. John delivered, as I mentioned, the birthday lecture in 2012, and we certainly want to welcome him back tonight to talk about Hemingway, the Hunter on Safari. So, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back the amazing, multi-talented John Barr. Those are your tools.
And this is on,
I just turned it on. I'm sure it's working.
So good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Comfortably all the way in the back. How about now? Good. Okay. If it fades, do something and I'll do better. And also the screen, I have a lot of slides, and I hope you can see the screen. If you're cut off in any way, maybe you want to find a seat that gives you a better view. There's empty ones right up in front here. Whatever works for you. Great. John, thank you, and thank you to your fellow trustees and to my friends here from the Hemingway Foundation. Before I launch into my remarks, I have to say that my wife Penny and I both serve on various not-for-profit boards that are literary in nature, and I never fail to recommend the Hemingway Foundation and its website as a model that they should go look at for ideas, the endless things that this organization comes up with to maintain community and national interests is really, I think, an example for other organizations, so I'm a real admirer. My subject tonight is Ernest Hemingway on Safari. And really that means 2 Ernest Hemingways. Hemingway the Hunter, who went on extended safaris in East Africa in 1933, and again 20 years later in 1953. And then Hemingway... Is that on?
Yeah, sure.
Have you noticed any AV system is the natural enemy of a public speaker?
It worked a little while.
Do you have the USB port in?
We just tried this out an hour ago. It was perfect.
Thank you. No, it was perfect because the part that we really need is in my pocket.
I told John if this doesn't work, I'm going to be spending the next half hour going like this.
Get it working, John.
I told John that I've been doing this ever since I was in grade school, but now I forget stuff. Unlike then, when I didn't forget much of anything. Okay, I think
We're good. Thank you so much.
try it now, make sure it's...
By golly. Oh, good. Saved by the bell. Since I'm only one sentence into this, I'll start over again. So my subject tonight is Ernest Hemingway on safari, but that's really two Ernest Hemingways. One is Hemingway the hunter, who went on extended safaris, as I said, in 1953, and then again 20 years later in 1953. And the second Hemingway, of course, is Hemingway the writer, who transmuted that experience into some of his finest short stories and nonfiction memoirs. Remarkably, this kind of big game hunting has changed almost not at all in the 80 years since Hemingway first practiced it. But one thing that has changed is public opinion about the subject. Our audience may well include deer hunters tonight who know Wisconsin is a state where schools and business close on opening day of deer season because everybody will be out hunting anyway. And our audience may include ardent conservationists who don't see the point of killing animals for pleasure. So I would also like to speak from personal experience. 4 hunting safaris over the past 20 years in the same areas that Hemingway hunted have exposed me to both sides of that debate in both Africa and America. I think the debate is a healthy one, but it is clouded by some common misconceptions that I will try to redress. And finally, I hope all of this will entertain you. It's not, in the Elysian fields of Hemingway scholarship, it's not that often that you run across a critic who has himself taken a lion, a leopard, or a Cape buffalo. Hemingway was a hunter all of his life. He came from a family on his father's side of sportsmen generations deep. At age 3, note the picture, he could cock and dry fire a gun by himself. He learned responsible hunting and best hunting practices from his father during boyhood summers in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, the setting of the Nick Adams stories. The knowledge of how to hunt and fish, that there was a way to do these things properly, informs these stories and fixes the art in them like specimens in alcohol with authentic detail. Hemingway loved the how of doing things. A full treatment of Hemingway the hunter, if we had the time, would include the young hunter in those Nick Adams stories. It would cover the mature Hemingway's prowess in Europe and the American West at bird shooting, known in the sport as wing shooting. And it would include his companion passion for fishing, both freshwater and salt. But the African safari serves us well tonight in the time we have, because it was the culmination of his lifetime of hunting. Just as boyhood fishing in Michigan led to marlin fishing off Cuba and the old man in the sea, so the boyhood hunting in the UP led to the wounded lion and the short happy life of Francis Macomber. Hemingway's first safari started in December 1933. It was a 10-week affair made financially possible by his second wife, Pauline, who accompanied him and actively participated in the hunt. She also did shooting. 72 days in the bush is a long safari by today's standards, where a 21-day safari is the standard long hunt. But getting to Africa also took much longer, traveling for weeks by steamship and train instead of an overnight flight on KLM. That first of his 2 safaris gave Hemingway the writer an abundance of usable experience for several reasons. As an author, he was at his peak following his decade in Paris, a remarkably prolific period that saw the publication of his short stories in collection form, The Sun Also Rises, and A Farewell to Arms. Only 34, critically acclaimed and famous, Hemingway was hungry for fresh experience to bring into his art. The 1930s were also the height of what could be called the golden age of safari. That era, which spanned the first half of the 20th century, began with Teddy Roosevelt's safari in 1909. One observer who hunted with both Roosevelt and Hemingway was struck by the similarities between the men. Both were physically strapping and bigger than life. Both had a winning smile. Both had poor eyesight and wore spectacles when they shot. And both were courageous. Fresh from his 8 years in the White House, Roosevelt undertook a commission from the Smithsonian to assemble a definitive collection of East African flora and fauna. East Africa sits under the right-hand bulge on the continent of Africa. It includes the countries of Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, which was then called Tanganyika. Done in the full Roosevelt style, the expedition lasted nearly a year and employed 500 porters before it was done. Roosevelt and his party, which included his son Kermit, took more than 10,000 animal specimens for the museums, including over 500 big game animals. Roosevelt's book, African Game Trails, is still in print and still read. Although it was a factual narrative, it also gave America its first look at the romance of safari hunting, the hardships, dangers, and pure adventure. In the decades that followed, the hunting safari became a magnet for celebrities, movie stars, and the nobility. Hollywood exploited it with a rash of safari movies, and so did early television. I have to point out, this movie called Safari has Victor Mature holding a machine pistol, which is not what you normally use to hunt big game in Africa. And here's another one that suggests they weren't all good movies. I think this could be King Kong, I'm not sure. Close enough. Hemingway made a second safari in 1953 with his fourth wife, Mary. But it was a sad contrast with the first safari. 2 airplane crashes, the second of which was erroneously reported to the world as fatal to the Hemingways, poor shooting on Hemingway's part, and aberrant behavior by Hemingway as he struggled with his demons. To me, that second safari, 20 years later, was his attempt to revisit and recover the intensity of the first one. I think his adventures in World War II played a similar role, an attempt to re-energize the writer by returning, again 20 years later, to the intensity of his experiences and injuries in World War I. Although the second safari and the second war both produced more novels and memoirs, the great earlier books are the ones on which Hemingway's reputation primarily rests. For those reasons, I'll concentrate tonight on the 1933 safari, the first one. A hunting safari is a lifetime experience, and those who go often feel an urge to write about it. And in fact, safari literature is a minor genre. All the books would not fill a library, but they could fill one wall of a good home library. Hundreds, if not thousands. Safari writers come in 2 kinds, hunters who write and writers who hunt. This is the first kind. This is a picture of Frederick Selous, who was one of the great early hunters in East Africa, and there's an enormous game reserve in the southern part of Tanzania called the Selous Game Reserve. The books written by people like Selous were the first kind, were the memoirs of the professional hunter, known in the business as the PH. Because the PH is so organic to a hunting safari, and to Hemingway's writings about it, I'd like to elaborate. If an American goes wing shooting with friends in Idaho, there might be a guide along, but there would be no professional master of the hunt. But on African safari, the clients are completely dependent on the PH for everything. The wilderness areas in which a safari operates are huge and typically without roads. On one of our hunts, we were the only human beings in a hunting reserve bigger than the state of Rhode Island. The PH leads the dawn to dusk daily searches for game, selects the trophy animals to be taken, and ensures compliance with the complex regulations that govern modern big game hunting in Africa today. He displays, or should display, the patience of Job when a client fumbles an easy shot. I can't say they always do. The code of the PH requires that he place himself bodily between his client and the charge of a dangerous animal, which could well be a lion or Cape buffalo that has just been shot badly by the client. The day before starting our third safari in 2005, a Canadian hunter was killed by a Cape buffalo, and people asked what happened to the PH. Where was the PH? In case of serious injury, the PH organizes a medical evacuation. He directs the trackers and the gun bearers with whom the clients are unable even to communicate unless they happen to speak Swahili. The PH has the absolute authority of a captain on a ship, but it goes much beyond that. He is also responsible for a happy, successful hunt. He is the teacher who coaches the client on his shooting and the naturalist who can answer any question about the wildlife that is everywhere abundant. He is a raconteur around the campfire at night, regaling his party with often hilarious jokes and safari stories. The best PHs are legendary figures, and Hemingway was fortunate to have the best of them all, Philip Percival. If you can see the red, yeah, that's Percival. This is Hemingway. This is Hemingway, that's Philip Percival, and these are two of Hemingway's hunting companions. And these trophies you see are, that's a greater kudu, two more greater kudus, and I think that's an oryx that he's got there, all large antelope. Percival went on the Roosevelt Safari as an assistant PH in 1909, at the very start of the golden age of safari, and was Hemingway's PH on the 1933 safari, this one. Hemingway wrote at the time that Percival was the finest man he knew. 20 years later, Percival came out of retirement at age 69 to lead the second Hemingway safari. In the green hills of Africa, the PH named Pop is based on Percival. In The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber, he is the model for Robert Wilson, the PH who makes a triangle with Macomber and his wife. As the Macombers work through the issues of their difficult marriage, Wilson, the PH, is the cool, keen observer of it all. I don't see how Hemingway could have written his stories the same if he had not had Percival at the center of them and Percival as his PH. Percival was the source of all that Hemingway learned about safari, and as we know, that body of professional knowledge was Hemingway's point of entry for everything from bullfighting to marlin fishing. And Percival's personal qualities, his integrity, unassuming bravery, and clipped English understatement were the model for central Hemingway characters. The second kind of contributor to safari literature is the novelist or memoirist who goes on safari and then writes about it. So they're a writer first, and then they go on safari. Robert Brewer wrote his best-selling safari novels in the mid-20th century. Some of you may remember those novels. And there were other novelists like them, but none of them approached Hemingway in the category of writers who hunt. Safari hunting is a unique mix of luxury and hardship. Those of you who have gone on photographic safaris, which are themselves lifetime adventures, know that the pleasures of the camp are all the greater for the complete wilderness that surrounds them. In an article for Look magazine, Hemingway wrote about this luxury in the wilderness. Quote, "After the sun is set and the fire is built in camp, the usual thing is for you to sit for a time and with your white hunter and companions discuss the events of the day and the plans for the following days. You have a moderate amount of drinks and then bathe in a canvas tub with water which has been warmed at the cook fire. After that, you put on pajamas and mosquito boots and over them a dressing gown and go out to the fire where you have one more drink and wait for dinner to be served. After dinner, you go to bed, which is covered by a mosquito net, and sleep or lie awake listening to the sound of the animals until half an hour before first light, when you are aroused by your personal boy bringing tea, known locally as chai." End quote. That's the luxury. The hardships of safari hunting come in the hunting itself. Here's my description of the work that goes into a lion hunt. Dragging a pile of hippo guts on a rope, the truck grinds and bucks through the thickest bush Raoul can find. We are creating a scent trail, an invitation to dinner for any cats in the area. We wear bandanas against the choking dust, sunglasses against the acacia thorns, baseball caps against the tsetse flies that hammer us anyway. There is an occasional yelp as one gets home. I glance at Penny's back, on which perhaps 40 tsetse flies are resting in wait. And here is my account of tracking a group of eland, the largest species of the antelope family. For the next 4 hours, we crouch, crab walk, and crawl over burnt grass, termite mounds, and dried buffalo wallows, but never get close enough for a shot. Losing sight of the group, we call in the truck, which informs us that we have clocked 9 kilometers on foot. In the equatorial heat, I am close to panic for lack of water. Isak and his trackers, half my age and twice my strength, look like they've been out for a walk in the park. But it's not suffering without a purpose. Here is the end of a successful buffalo hunt and of a lion hunt. Wow. A moment ago, I spoke about clients who shoot badly, but there is no shame in that. Shooting in Africa can be extremely difficult. Because the game tends to move around at first light and last light, the shooting window is often in low light conditions, a few minutes or even seconds after or before complete darkness. The ranges to shoot can be sudden and short, and they can also be very long. Imagine trying to hold in your sights an antelope the size of a white-tailed deer at 300 yards. That puts the animal at a distance from you equal to 3 football fields laid end to end. The pressure on the hunter to make the shot successfully is intense. The months of planning and the travel and expense of a safari are mere prelude to this moment. The PH steps back, the hunter steps up, and it is his alone to succeed or fail. That's me, that's our PH, Franz Coupe, that's the gun bearer, and that's the game warden who goes with you in the truck and actually observes. So, I mean, there's no fooling around with the rules. He's right there to witness the entire thing. Shooting sticks, incidentally, are very common. In the movies, you see people take these heroic shots off their hands. Those are called offhand shooting because it's off of your hand. Nobody does that if they can find a place to rest their rifles. So it could be a deserted anthill, it could be a tree, it could be anything else, but these are called shooting sticks, and they matter a lot to a successful shot. Hi, guys. Some of my best friends just walked in. My wife, Penny, who has accompanied me on all our safaris, made the observation, if you can't shoot well, don't go on safari. You'll spend all your time chasing wounded animals. Fortunately, she was not commenting on my shooting at that moment. Hunting rifles are precision instruments, but they are bulky and heavy. The big double rifles, which have 2 barrels side by side, so they look like a shotgun, but they're in fact 2 rifles. The purpose of these is for dangerous game. If you only have 1 barrel, you fire and you have to reload the cartridge. Meanwhile, the Cape Buffalo is coming after you. So if you have 2 barrels loaded and you have 2 triggers, you shoot once and you shoot again right away. If you shoot them both at once, it will break your collarbone. They got a savage kick. So the big double rifles can weigh 11 or 12 pounds and have a savage kick. Hemingway's biggest rifle was a .470 double, but he avoided using it because the involuntary flinch caused by the shooter's anticipation of the recoil threw off his aim. So if it's a really big gun, you can't help but do that because you know it's going to go off. So the rifle he loved was a smaller 30-06 Springfield, which would be like a 7mm European round. And he favored it as he would a close friend. He owned it for decades, and he had it restocked 3 different times. Hemingway could be an extraordinarily good shot, although he did not shoot well on the second safari. In today's big game hunting, rifles are equipped with precision telescopic sights, but in Hemingway's day, all the shooting was done with open sights, or they're called iron sights by people, which is far more challenging, especially at longer ranges. Based on his descriptions of his own shooting, Hemingway seemed to be particularly skilled at leading a running target, or sighting ahead of it by the proper amount, so that when you pull the trigger and the bullet gets there, the animal will also be there. That skill would also make him an excellent wing shot because you're tracking moving birds, flying birds all the time. The Carlos Baker biography credits Hemingway with shooting Cape Buffalo at 300 and 400 yards, but the hunter in me questions that. The large caliber rifles used on buffalo simply are not accurate at that kind of range. And in practice, buffalo are commonly taken at close range, 50 or 100 yards, and are seldom killed with a single shot because the animals are so tough. Out of his African experiences, Hemingway wrote 2 nonfiction books, The Green Hills of Africa and True at First Light, as well as 5 short stories. On one level, these are memorable adventure stories. But what takes the short stories out of slick adventure magazines and into the realm of literature are the revelations, discoveries really, of unexpected truths about human nature. The Short Happy Life of Francis Macomber, one of his greatest short stories, is a prime exemplar. Francis Macomber is a handsome, wealthy American who meets every outward definition of success. He and his wife, Margot, herself a perfect beauty, are on hunting safari with their PH, Robert Wilson, a.k.a. Philip Percival. Macomber shoots a magnificent black-maned lion, wounding it but not killing it. The rules of safari hunting require that they pursue the wounded lion, which has taken cover in deep grass, and finish it. Here in Hemingway's words is what happens next. Quote, "The lion could hear the men talking, and he waited, gathering all of himself into this preparation for a charge as soon as the men would come into the grass. As he heard their voices, his tail stiffened to twitch up and down, and as they came into the edge of the grass, he made a coughing grunt and charged. Macomber was close to Wilson, his rifle cocked. They had just moved into the grass when Macomber heard the blood-choked coughing grunt and saw the swishing rush in the grass. The next thing he knew, he was running wildly, in panic, in the open, running toward the stream. He heard the carawang of Wilson's big rifle, and again in a second, carawang, and turning saw the lion, horrible looking now, with half his head seeming to be gone, crawling toward Wilson in the edge of the tall grass, while the red-faced man hit the bolt on his short, ugly rifle, and aimed carefully as another blasting carawang came from the muzzle, and the crawling, heavy bulk of the lion stiffened, and the huge, mutilated head slid forward, and Macomber, standing by himself in the clearing where he had run, holding a loaded rifle, while 2 black men and a white man looked back at him in contempt, knew the lion was dead. He came toward Wilson, his tallness all seeming a naked reproach, and Wilson looked at him and said, "Want to take pictures?" This video clip, taken on a modern safari a few years ago, shows what Macomber faced or failed to face. It's about a 2-minute clip.
After almost 2 hours of careful tracking, the score shows that the second lion has moved off on its own, and the wounded lion is traveling in a circle, in brush so thick that visibility is limited to a few yards in any direction. Discovering the lion has crossed over their own tracks, the hunters realize they have become
Pretty much black. Sorry.
Glimpsing the animal disappear behind cover, they give chase. But the wounded animal doesn't present a shot. Hearing the lion's ominous warning and realizing that a charge is imminent, the hunters spread out. Bursting from the thick cover, the furious cat charges directly for Ronnie Krause.
This is slow motion.
Thanks to an incredible shot from the hip, Ronnie saves himself from a terrible fate, receiving nothing more than a healthy dose of lion slobber on one knee.
You know the name of the PH in that film?
Sorry?
You know the name of the PH in that
I
film?
do not. No, this was on YouTube.
He's a longtime friend of mine, and I can't think of his name.
Oh, really? Do you know this? Know this
Yeah, I've
incident?
known him for years.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'd love to hear more. Yeah, good. In the lion charge you just saw, or the one like it for Macomber, Macomber discovered that his courage failed him with the added humiliation that his cowardice was witnessed by the hunting party and his wife, who watched from the hunting truck. Margot showed her contempt for Macomber by kissing Wilson, the PhD, for his bravery, and doing so in front of Macomber. Excuse me. That night she left their bed and went to Wilson's tent for 2 hours. But then Hemingway, the artist, shows us something remarkable about human fear and courage. On a buffalo hunt the following day, Macomber finds his courage. This picture, and a second clip I'm about to show you, will show you why many consider the Cape Buffalo to be the most dangerous game of all, and more than a match for a lion. This is a shorter clip.
This extraordinary footage shows a lion being flicked 5 metres into the air. The juvenile predator was about to complete a kill before a giant male buffalo intervened to save his friend from certain death. The hungry duo spent 45 minutes stalking their prey in the Kruger National Park, South Africa. But after bringing down the defenceless buffalo, one lion left itself open to a surprise attack. The astonishing moment was captured by 52-year-old Ian Matheson and his 16-year-old son, Oliver, during an early morning safari.
Wide black horns on their heads as they galloped heads out, the heads not moving. In the chase that follows, Macomber shoots well and shoots down all three, but one gets up and disappears into the tall grass. Wilson and Macomber will have to go in and finish it. Margot looks forward with relish to another display of her husband's cowardice. Macomber, quote, expected the feeling he had had about the lion to come back, but it did not. For the first time in his life, he really felt wholly without fear. Instead of fear, he had a feeling of definite elation. Can we go in after him now? Asked Macomber eagerly. Wilson looked at him appraisingly. Damned if this isn't a strange one, he thought. Yesterday he's scared sick, and today he's a ruddy fire eater. Macomber felt a wild, unreasonable happiness that he had never known before. Quote, you know, I don't think I'll ever be afraid of anything again, Macomber said to Wilson. Something happened in me after we first saw the buff and started after him, like a dam bursting. It was pure excitement. Quote, you've gotten awfully brave, awfully suddenly, his wife said contemptuously, but her contempt was not secure. She was very afraid of something. The brush was very thick ahead and the ground was dry. Quote, he's dead in there, Wilson said. Good work. And he turned to grip Macomber's hand, and as they shook hands, grinning at each other, the gun-bearer shouted wildly, and they saw him coming out of the bush sideways, fast as a crab, and the bull coming nose out, mouth tight closed, blood dripping, massive head straight out, coming in a charge, his little eyes, pig eyes, bloodshot as he looked at them. Wilson, who was ahead, was kneeling, shooting, and Macomber, as he fired, on hearing his shot in the roaring of Wilson's gun, saw fragments like slate burst from the huge boss of the horns, and the head jerked. He shot again at the wide nostrils and saw the horns jolt again and fragments fly.
and he did not see Wilson now, and aiming carefully, shot again with the buffalo's huge bulk almost on him, and his rifle almost level with the oncoming head, nose out, and he could see the little wicked eyes, and the head started to lower, and he felt a sudden white-hot blinding flash explode inside his head, and that was all he ever felt. Wilson had ducked to one side to get in a shoulder shot. Macomber had stood solid and shot for the nose, shooting a touch high each time and hitting the heavy horns, splintering and chipping them like hitting a slate roof. And Mrs. Macomber, in the car, had shot at the buffalo with the 6.5 Mannlicher, and as it seemed about to gore Macomber, and it hit her husband about 2 inches up and a little to one side of the base of his skull. Wilson walked over to the motor car where the woman sat crying in the corner. Quote, "That was a pretty thing to do," he said in a toneless voice. "He would have left you, too." "Stop it," she said. "There's a hell of a lot to be done," he said, "and I'll have to send a truck off to the lake to wireless for a plane to take the three of us into Nairobi. Why didn't you poison him? That's what they do in England." "Stop it, stop it, stop it," the woman cried. Wilson looked at her with his flat blue eyes. "I'm through now," he said. "I was a little angry. I'd begun to like your husband." "Oh, please stop it," she said. "Please stop it." "That's better," Wilson said. "Please is much better. Now I'll stop." Here we have the quintessential Hemingway. The character of Macomber, confronted with the mortal danger of a lion charge, discovers his tragic flaw. Fear overwhelms the courage he's expected to show. He panics and runs away. The next day, Macomber redeems himself in the buffalo charge, displaying the trait Hemingway most admired in his heroes. In the face of mortal danger, to act with grace under pressure. Even if only to be outmaneuvered by fate in the form of a bullet from his wife's gun. The unexpected human truth he reveals is that fear and courage are not fixed parts of a person's character, but variables. In a moment of life-threatening danger, they can go either way. This sequence of a failure of fortitude, followed by subsequent redemption, reminds me of Stephen Crane's Civil War novel, The Red Badge of Courage. The protagonist, approaching his first battle, worries about how he will behave under fire. In the event, his comrades panic and bolt, and so does he. In the next encounter with the enemy, he masters his fear and performs with conspicuous bravery. The common trait shared by Hemingway heroes is guts. In the face of imminent death, they stand and deliver. We know Hemingway as one of the great modernist writers, but his use of the hero to show us a model of moral conduct also places him among the epicists, those who write epics. Like Homer's Odysseus and Virgil's Aeneas, Jake Barnes, Robert Jordan, and Santiago show grace under pressure. Hemingway coined that phrase, and it has entered our language. I would like to end my remarks tonight with a postscript on hunting as it is practiced today, and I offered that at the outset. Its critics, who include some but not all conservationists, and all, not some, of the people you would meet at a Manhattan cocktail party, question how the killing of animals for pleasure can be called a sport. Its defenders would say that hunting has been a part of man's nature since he came down from the trees to evolve as a hunter-gatherer. And they would point to the personal challenge and excitement that I have tried to convey tonight as their reasons for hunting. Hunting makes them more alive as human beings. Paradoxically, the hunter and the conservationist often coexist in the same person. Teddy Roosevelt is called the father of conservation in American history. As president, he formed the U.S. Forestry Service, established the first national parks, and signed into law the first 50 federal bird sanctuaries. He was also, of course, an enthusiastic hunter. In Africa, one of his rifles, a magnificent Holland & Holland Royal Deluxe Double, was a gift from English admirers to thank him for his contributions to conservation. Ducks Unlimited was founded in 1937 by sportsmen to preserve habitat and protect game populations. It was not always so, but in the past century, hunters in America have embraced the principles of conservation because they have come to understand if there's no game, there's no hunting. That same symbiosis between hunting and conservation exists in Africa today. Hunting safaris in Tanzania generate hard currencies for the government to fund conservation and anti-poaching units to protect the game. In addition, the private safari outfitters hire their own game rangers if they can afford it. The threat to African game populations does not come from legal hunting. On a 21-day safari, one hunter might take 15 to 20 animals. Only males are taken, everything is licensed, and there is a game warden along observing from the truck, as you saw in that earlier photo. Of the meat taken, the safari camp keeps a small amount for itself, and the rest is given to the local population. The real threats to African game populations come from habitat encroachment and from poaching. Habitat encroachment in Kenya and Tanzania comes from the expanding use of land for agriculture and from the Maasai, who graze their domestic livestock anywhere, including the game reserves. The death of that Canadian hunter I mentioned earlier was not a hunting accident. He and his PH had gotten out of their truck to inspect the tracks at a waterhole when they were charged from behind by a Cape buffalo. The animal was crazed by thirst because the Maasai had driven the game away to conserve the water for their herds. Reportedly, the hunters' rifles were not even loaded. Poachers come in two varieties. There is the local population who use the meat to supplement their diet. Not owning guns, they use wire snares that do not discriminate among males, females, and young, and poisoned arrows. Like these. This was confiscated in Tanzania. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. By game rangers, and Penny and I were helping, supporting things, and they gave us these. This is made out of, I think, buffalo or rhinoceros hide. Beautiful kind of homemade work. And the arrows are still in here. And they still have the poison on the tips. So the way these are used by local populations would be to hide behind a bush at a water hole when the game comes into water at night. They would, this can kill an elephant in a couple of days. Tipped with all they do is seek to puncture the skin and put the nerve poison into the system, and then they follow the animal until it dies. Both the snares and the arrows I just showed you result in agonizing slow death for the animals. The second variety of poacher is commercial poachers. These may be soldiers of fortune from neighboring countries like Somalia who may use planes and automatic weapons to kill elephant for their ivories, rhinoceros for their horns, and many other animals for their hides. The relative game, and this is the interesting point to me in this discussion, the relative game populations in Kenya and Tanzania are instructive. The countries are adjacent, as I showed you on the map, and both combat poaching and do so with mixed results. They do it, it has an effect, but it doesn't stop it. Kenya outlawed all hunting in 1977, but 35 years later, its game populations are down dramatically. Some estimates are by 50%. Tanzania has always permitted it, and its game populations are robust. The explanation for the paradox lies, I think, in habitat encroachment and the role of the tsetse fly. The tsetse fly is lethal to domestic livestock, but wild game has developed immunity to it. Kenya suffers little from tsetse fly infestation, which leaves the country's game reserves open to encroachment from farming, and suffers heavily from tsetse fly infestation. And those areas have no economic use other than hunting. It turns out that those 40 tsetse flies on Penny's back are the hunter's best friends, not to mention their importance to the wild, beautiful game of East Africa. Thank you.